on a fruit farm, and this spring, it's my wife's family's farm. This spring we had for the third year in a row really bad pollination, and it was really tough for the cherries. And so we're seeing even close to home here the impact of climate change. The reason I mention that is I started off organising, doing campaigning by getting involved in climate change. I started off at a fairly young age, spending my summers doing a lot of this, hanging around campfires with an awesome progressive youth organisation in England. It's called Woodcraft Folk. So I, from a fairly early age, had a lot of experiences that kind of rooted me in an understanding of environmentalism and social justice. My mum and dad, when I was a little kid, took me to rallies against nuclear power and nuclear arms in the UK. I then started doing science. I took chemistry actually, and it was the thing I loved the most in high school, and then I started doing that in university. And it was around about when I was doing my master's that I realised that we had a really big problem. And we're seeing it in the melting ice caps. We're seeing it, farmers are seeing it on their farms every day. And we're seeing it down the road from here. This is Sarnia, Ontario, where you've got some of the most polluted areas in the country and some of the communities that are feeling the impacts of reckless fossil fuel expansion and the toxins that causes the worst. So the reason I mention all of this is that there's you guys, I'm sure, know about climate change and why it's such a big problem. Part of the reason we started up now was because I got involved in doing a lot of work getting young people engaged in climate change, trying to influence what was going on at the UN, trying to influence government policy, thinking if we could only just sort of convince the politicians that we were right, that they'd do the right thing and we'd get policy and we'd have action on climate change. That turned out to not be the case. We saw through the collapse of the Copenhagen climate negotiations just 3-4 years ago now, that even when the science is compelling, even when all the scientists are saying we have to take action, the politicians continue to be beholden to the interests of the fossil fuel companies, and we don't get the action that we need. And this is not just true of climate change, this is true of a range of issues. You've got powerful interests, you've got powerful economic interests that influence our government systems. And we realised that actually what we needed to do if we were going to address some of those really big challenges in a meaningful way was figure out a different way of organising, a different way of creating actual real political power that was not in the hands of big businesses, but was in the hands of people. So we started looking around the world to see what other countries have been doing. And we saw in the US a group called Move On. Has anyone heard of Move On? Okay. It's a US group, they work on a range of issues. We saw them in the US, we saw a similar organisation in the UK called 38 Degrees. And we saw this model of online organising that can get very big, very fast, and reach large numbers of people and actually build political power. So what we started doing was looking at how to start implementing something like that in Canada. So what we do with Lead Now is we do a lot of online campaigns. But the secret about the online campaigns is it's not actually about the online stuff, it's about what happens afterwards. So we'll run campaigns across a range of issues to try and get people engaged, first and foremost, about something they're already paying attention to. Knowing that if we've got them engaged on something, we've started a conversation, and we can go from there to get them more deeply engaged. Maybe they'll go from doing their first ever click on a petition to writing a letter to the editor, to maybe donating to put an ad in the newspaper, to eventually going out to a rally, to getting their friends organised and to vote on that, or even organising a protest, something like that. So Lead Now's model is built in on working on a range of issues. My passion is around climate change, but we work on a range of things so that we can start that conversation. And this is kind of how we started up. We started with conversations in living rooms and coffee shops, town halls, groups not dissimilar to this, all across the country, in 2011. And we did that, and we started this conversation around what are the issues people want to see change, what do people care about. Just wondering if there's a glass of water around somewhere. So we started with this conversation, and it was really interesting. We found time and time again, and we've done this a couple of times since, that people, when we do surveying online, when we get people together in face-to-face groups, there's a few big things that come up. It's protecting the environment, it's taking action on climate change. It's reducing the massive and structural inequalities that's tearing at the fabric of Canada's society. And it's fixing our democracy. We know that the current government, the Hub Conservatives, got elected with 39% of the vote. And in fact, it was only actually 24% of registered voters when you look at the 40% that didn't vote at all. So we've got a democratic crisis, and our electoral system is delivering results that people, that isn't actually what the majority of Canadians are voting for. So those are the three big things that keep coming up. I'm going to talk through just for a few minutes, and I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions and some discussion of what we've got on next. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit about kind of how our campaigns run, because people often want to know. This is where we're at today. We've got, I got this yesterday actually, thank you so much, 318,000 supporters all across Canada, from coast to coast. I like to put that up because it's really quite inspiring. I pulled out, I'm afraid I didn't have time to pull out Hamilton, but this is Toronto. And that's postal code, so there's often more than one person where each one of those dots on the maps are. So what we're trying to do is, by reaching out across this range of issues, build a really big community that can be engaged and organised and actually make a little bit of difference on the issues that matter. So that's what it looks like. This is some of what our really early work looked like. Right around the federal election, some friends of ours at the University of Guelph got in touch and said, we've got this great idea for vote mobs. Did anybody hear about the vote mobs? Yeah. So they came to us and said, we're going to do this viral video vote mob, flash mob thing. We want to try and make it happen everywhere. Can you help? And we'd identified wanting to try and increase youth voter turnout in the elections as something that would be quite important. So we said yes, and we helped organise the second and third vote mobs. One out west in the University of Victoria, and the next one in University of Ottawa. And then after that, it took off. It went viral. We put up a web page, which is that's just a photo of what some of it looks like. I'm just going to try and see if I can. There we go. That's better. I don't have the picture of the website in this set of slides, but essentially we put up a map showing people where they were happening. Whenever anyone started up a new one, they'd get in touch, we'd put it on the map, we'd let people know what's happening, and it spread all across the country. The interesting thing with it was, and this is going to be relevant for some of what I want to talk about a little bit later, which is the next election, we actually saw the voter turnout go up, the youth voter turnout in the ridings where the vote mobs were happening. So it didn't tip into a national sort of awakening of young people as we hoped, but the turnout did actually go up in a way you'd expect. I'm going to give a bit of a snapshot of one of our campaigns, just to give you a sense of how it works. This was a cartoon in the Edmonton Journal. It was actually almost 2 years ago now. You can read it. Hub was talking to his aide and he's saying, we're going to expand the prison. The aide says, what are you going to do about housing for the poor and the mentally ill? He says, I just told you. The omnibus crime bill that came out in late 2011 was not something I knew anything about before. My background, like I said, was in climate change. And one of the most interesting things about this work has been learning how to very quickly get up to speed on issues that we know nothing about, and also figuring out how to talk to the right experts and run the campaigns and partnerships with the right people so that you can actually be effective and have an impact. We launched a campaign on the crime bill, which was really taking the wrong approach to criminal justice. It's all about locking people up instead of dealing with the root causes of crime, homelessness, addiction, poverty, and we wanted to push back. We organised a national petition. This is often what it looks like. You put in your name, email, postal code. The system figures out who your MP is, sends off the message. It's super easy and quick for people that have never done anything before to take that first step to getting engaged. We did. This was part of the campaign, partway on. We did provincial campaigns, focusing on the Premier to try and get them to push back against the provincial government. We targeted the Senate at one point. We got people to do phone calls. We put up a little tool that you punch in your postal code, will figure out who your MP is, give you the phone number, and then you can call them right there and then with some talking points, just to try and make it really, really easy for people. So this is sort of some of what our actions look like and how we go about kind of bringing people up from doing something that's really quite easy to doing something that's harder over time. We then targeted the Senate, and by the time this was done, it was over 450,000 emails that were in senators' inboxes. We had a number of the senators said publicly in the media that this was the most emails they'd had about anything ever. And we were asking them to actually reassert the second thought, not to just rubber stamp the crime bill. What we did after that, and I said about sort of bridging from the online stuff to the offline organising, there was a number of Republican judges from Texas, so really sort of the most serious conservatives you can imagine down in Texas, that put out this commentary saying, Canada, we've been down this road, don't go there, don't do it. And so what we actually did is we took that and we built on that and we said, okay, we're going to go outside MPs' offices all across the country and dress up like cowboys and say, hey, Texas is saying this is a bad idea, it must really be a bad idea. So don't mess up like Texas, stop the crime bill. And we organised some distributed rallies all across the country. This is sort of what it looks like. You guys have been out to protest here in Hamilton, I'm sure, so this is the kind of thing. You've got folks in cowboy hats talking to the media. You've got the grandma in Victoria talking to CTV. This wonderful woman who I also always put up, because she went outside her MP's office in this tiny little rural community and stood with a sign on her own and got a passerby to take a photo. And she sent that in and it got in a local paper. And what happened as a result of this was that there was media coverage all across the country in places where the Conservatives weren't expecting it. So this is another thing we try and do, as well as bring people up to doing harder and harder things over time. We try to do creative campaigning in ways that the decision makers we're trying to influence don't expect. If you're doing something bad as a politician, you're going to make this calculation about what you can get away with. And part of that is expecting what kinds of opposition you're going to get. So we don't try and do opposition that they're not going to expect to try and sort of catch them off guard. What's this? Just another rally sign. Okay, so we've done a bunch of things since. That's kind of a little bit of a snapshot of what one of our campaigns look like. We've done a number of things since. This was photos of the Defend Our Coast rallies, which happened all across BC last year, to try and stop, or at least be part of the movement that's working to stop the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline, which is a tar sands pipeline to take diluted bitumen from Alberta across to the west coast and then onto tankers. There's a similar fight going on here in Ontario right now with Line 9. I'm sure you've heard of it. We did a bunch of work on the omnibus budget bills when those were happening, and in a similar way we had an online campaign that then bridged into offline actions, rallies on Parliament Hill and all across the country. And this is some more photos from Defend Our Coast. One in, I think that was Vancouver, one way out on the west coast, and this one actually I think was at a small, this one was at one of the First Nations communities in British Columbia. So that's a sort of a snapshot of what some of our organising looks like. I wanted to show you this, which just happened today. If you guys are on our email list, you might have seen this. We just yesterday we rented this billboard, which is in downtown Calgary, and it's a stone's throw away from where the Conservative convention is going to be happening on Thursday. It's actually remarkably affordable to buy a big digital billboard, so we put this up to send a message to Conservative MPs about the Canada-China investors deal, FIPA, which risks essentially giving away control over our democratic control over our natural resources to state-owned companies from China. It has some really problematic elements to it. It's the worst of which is that it would allow foreign companies that then have investments in the tar sands to sue us if we improve our environmental regulations, or if we do anything bold that would restrict their profits. So we put that up outside the Conservative Convention, which will be fun. I wish I could see half the space when it gets off the subway. A couple of things I wanted to just briefly let you guys know about. You can't quite see the link at the bottom. This is a new platform that we're just testing out at the moment. It's called new.leadnow.ca, and it lets anybody start and organise their own campaign using tools similar to the ones that we use for our national organising. You can start a campaign, share it, get traction on social media, and build a petition. It makes it really easy for you to also then create a PDF that you can take the decision maker and hand in. So it's a really interesting and useful tool set that we're in the process of rolling out. One big thing that's coming up next month on November 16th, and you may have heard about this already, it's called Defend Our Climate, Defend Our Communities. We're working with Environmental Defence here in Ontario. There's a bunch of different groups that are working to do rallies all across the country, specifically around trying to create a sort of wall-to-wall opposition across Canada to reckless fossil fuel expansion. So this is very relevant for Hamilton as well. The last thing I want to put up, and I'm hoping that I can pitch for Lamar in a little bit to have a chat about some of this stuff. We're thinking a lot right now about what it will look like to take this really big community that we've built up, essentially by doing online and on-the-ground campaigning, and transition that into an organising machine during the next election that can influence the result in enough key ridings that we can see a change in the government. We believe strongly that we put the issues first, and we're independent from any of the political parties, but at the same time we know that if we're going to make big progress on the issues that we care about and our community cares about, we're going to first of all have to shift the government. So we're putting a lot of thinking into what that might look like. This is one of the models of we have kind of local community teams that go door to door, get people signed up, talk about the issues, and do that in a way that scales all across the country so that we can shift things. We can talk about that a bit more now. I'd love to if we have time. We're also about to do a kind of a webinar sort of conference call thing. When is it?
Next Thursday and next Sunday.
Next Thursday and Sunday. There's a couple of times to join it, and that's the link for that. If you want to plug into that, we'll also be sending it out to our email list with a reminder about that. Yeah.
Is that you pitching?
That's me pitching. So I guess yeah, I'd love to. We haven't figured out exactly how we want to do this, so we can either just do questions, or if you want to chat about election stuff first.
I'll say something super brief, and then we can discuss and do questions.
Yeah.
And I'll come over here. Okay, so Matthew actually covered the introduction. Basically, we do two sorts of things. The first is pulling people into the community, and can everyone hear me in the back?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
No, just a minute. Somebody said not too well. Did you hear that bit?
I did. I was going to speak louder, and then I was going to check again.
Slow down a little bit, please. And don't drop your voice if you can help it at the end of something.
All right. We'll see what I can do.
We always appreciate public speaking.
Seniors like to be heard.
I'm trying to think of so many different ways to change the way I'm speaking. Stop me if you need me to change something. So we basically do two different things. The first is bringing people in through our rapid response campaigns. The second is trying to figure out how to bring our community, which is now over 320,000 people, together to push for change. What we're thinking, so in 2015, there are two things that we want to do with the election. The first is to ensure that some sort of progressive government is elected, either by electing a progressive government or ensuring that if Harper has a minority, we're able to have a community with enough power to push the other parties to work together for progressive change. We also, like Matthew said, know that in the current context, it doesn't matter who's in power because the window that they're working in is pretty conservative. We need to shift what's politically possible nationally by coming together to push for that kind of change in order to influence the kinds of things that happen in government. So I want to tell you about, actually, and so this picture here shows a model that we're considering using for building an on-the-ground network of skilled organizers who are able to organize around the election and build their power around the election, but then after that, keep pushing for change. So we're trying, this is an age-old question, how do we use an election as a movement-building opportunity? And so to inform our discussion, I want to kind of frame it in two different ways. We would welcome any sort of feedback around this strategic framing, but you are all already leaders, you've been doing this forever. You're also part of a network, or an organization that is networked across the country, and I'm sure that you collaborate with other chapters once in a while. So any advice that you have for us around what you would find helpful for collaborating with folks in another community who are pursuing a similar strategy, or that kind of thing. Anything that you've learned from the organizing that you already do, we would really appreciate that. Does that make sense?
That was better than I.
Thank you.
So let's open it up. We can have questions, discussion on this or the other things that I was talking about.
Can we have some
Put the
lights up
lights
a
up a
bit
bit,
now? Are you going to use any more PowerPoint? No, okay, that's great.
Yeah, with an Ontario election expected by spring, is there a chance to perhaps use the Ontario election campaign as a way to bit of a research vehicle for the federal election?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we're wondering if we can use the Ontario election as a bit of a springboard to federal organising. That's definitely possible. We're just at the process of really trying to figure out what we're going to want to do in the federal election. We'd already identified the municipal elections as well as another possibility. A lot of the ways that you organise and the kind of getting people involved, getting people engaged, building the volunteer networks, that can hopefully transfer from one to the other. So we're very interested in piloting stuff during the Ontario elections and municipally. We haven't yet figured out exactly what that looks like.
Is he now taking any position on the Quebec government's bid to retain the gun control registry?
The gun control.
Ontario, for example, hasn't supported Quebec's appeal. If Ontario got behind Quebec, I think it would really help.
We haven't done any campaigning on that. I mean, personally, I support it, but it's not something we've basically had the